Om Sahanavavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhetamastu Mahavidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavat Pada Shankaram Loka Shankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Kritau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punah. Na Vittena Tarpaniyo Manusha. Nachiketa tells to Yamaraja, Yama, his own teacher, supposed to be, he has not yet. He says, I want to have the first boon you have given, the second boon you have given, whereas the third boon I want to know what happens. Is there something that survives the death? That survives the death of all labels. I know what doesn't survive, but I know all the labels don't survive. The body doesn't survive. And the body based labels like caste and creed, gender, these they don't survive. Social identity, social labels also don't survive. I know that. Without any Nam Nishan, everything dies. But is there something that survives their death? Is there something that survives the death of all the labels? Is there something that survives the death of the body and the body based labels? Then Yama says, no, 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 no. Don't ask this question. You are too young. And even gods get confusion when they think about this topic. And therefore, you can ask for something else. You can't ask for this Brahma Vidya. Then Yama says, no, then the Nachiketa says, no, 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 I don't want anything else. I want only this. Now he offers him a lot of wealth. Then Nachiketa says, na vittena tarpaniyo manushya. Man cannot be satisfied with wealth. Why? Because it falls short of fullness. Every pleasure is a thought, and a thought falls short of the being. This is the principle. Na vittena tarpaniyo manushya. Lapsyamahe vittamadrakshmaket. Now I have had your darshan. I'm going to be rich anyway. Your darshan itself will make me rich. Adrakshmateva. Jibishyama yavadi sishyasitum. As long as you are in power, you are not going to come and take my life out. And therefore, as long as you are in power, I'm going to live for a long time. Long time is a very, very, very subjective thing. Somebody wants to live for 50 years and then die, and another person wants to die 60 years, another person wants to live 70 years. This is all, a length of time is always subjective like. But the universal, the choiceless like is he wants to be eternal. He always wants to be. That is a choiceless like. If somebody says, I am having a lot of problems, let me die and let me go, that is a subjective desire. And if you are thinking about the long life, I will, as long as I am in time as a jiva, and I can live on in time as a jiva as long as you are in power. Varastu me varaniyasayeva. But the third boon I am not going to. Third boon, these things, a long life cannot be an alternative to third boon. And a lot of pleasures are not an alternative to the third boon. A lot of wealth is not an alternative to the third boon. Why it is not an alternative? Because fullness, the unlimitedness cannot be an limitedness cannot be an alternative to the fullness. Incompleteness cannot be an alternative to completeness. G. Ignorance cannot be an alternative to knowledge. Inertness cannot be an alternative to consciousness. And therefore, the third boon represents the fullness. I want to know, is there something that survives? If there is something that survives the death of all the labels, then that should be eternal, that should be immortal. That means the third boon is for the eternal. When the time, when the time itself, I know that the time itself doesn't survive. The time dies. When a man dies, the time dies, the space dies, the whole universe dies. And therefore, when the universe itself really is not seen, when the time is not seen, when the space is not seen, when all of them as though die, is there something that survives? If something survives, that means it is definitely the eternal. If something survives the death of time, then it is definitely timeless, it is eternal. But is there something that survives? And therefore, my question is only about the fullness. And therefore, the third boon represents my desire for fullness. Is there something called fullness which survives the end of the limitations, the end of all the labels, the end of time, the end of space, the end of form, the end of thought? When you transcend all these things, is there something that is untranscendably there, present? Does your presence die? Or you can transcend your presence also? And therefore, that is my third boon. And that third boon, there is no alternative to third boon, please. There is an alternative to a cup of tea. I can have a coffee. For a hot drink, there is an alternative that is a cold drink. In this world, every object has an alternative. But when it comes to being, to be conscious and to be full, there is no alternative. Consciousness has no alternative. Fullness has no alternative. Truth has no alternative, please. One's own existence has no alternative. Your own non-existence cannot be an alternative to your existence. Your existence has no alternative. And therefore, the third boon also has no alternative. Please don't try to offer me something else. Don't try to tempt me with something else, something else. I'm not going to be tempted by all your temptations. Please teach me, is there something that survives the death of the entire realm of labels? When man dies, is there something that some people say, yes, there is something that Atma survives. Some people say nothing survives, everything is gone. In this manner, there are two views. Now, having come to a person like you, who is a Devata, why should I fall for something less than fullness, less than this third boon? I want to know what is there, what is the truth beyond this life. When this life ends, is there something that survives? If there is something that survives, then that should be the truth. And that means my quest is for the truth. The third boon is for the truth. Ajiryatam, the non-eternal, the eternal beings. Ajiryatam means those who age. You don't age, Yama, you are a Devata. You don't age. Ajiryatam. Amritanam, and you are eternal. You have understood the eternal. You know the ageless truth. You seem to know the agelessness. You seem to know the changelessness. Upetya, having approached you, people like you. Jiryan, immortal. Jiryan means the one who ages. Martyaha, a mortal. Kvadhastaha, kuhu means the earth. Adastaha means the earthly individual. The earthly individual is in comparison to Pitriloka, Swargaloka, Brahmaloka, he is below. And therefore, he is called Adastaha, Kvadastaha, Kuadastaha, a mirthly individual. Even any struggler is a Kvadastaha anyway. If there is somebody who is struggling, who is subject to likes and dislikes, then he is Kvadastaha. Prajanan, knowing very well, Samaste huve bhi, Prajanan, knowing very well that he has come to Bhagavan, he has come to the eternal, he has come to an effulgent being. Abhidhyayan varna rati pramodan, understanding the limitations of every pleasure. Abhidhyayan, understanding. Varna rati pramodan, having understood the limitations of the various kinds of pleasures and their limitations and their enjoyments. Atidirge jivite ko rameta. Who is going to revel in the long life? Because long life is not man's wish. Long life, eternity is man's wish. Time, freedom from time is man's wish. Long time is not man's wish. Because what is long time? Then that becomes very subjective. One person says 200 years is a long time. Another person says, no, 500 years is a long time. And another person says 1,000 years is a long time. It is all subjective, please. Long time is a subjective thing. And when man is tired, he transcends time in order to find peace. And that itself is an indication that he is not interested. He doesn't find peace in time, inside time. When he transcends time, he finds peace. He doesn't find peace in an object. When he transcends an object, he finds peace. He doesn't find peace in the thought that I am the form. When he transcends that thought that I am the form, when he transcends the form and also the thought that I am the form, he finds peace. That is what is called Sat Sampatti. Sat Sampatti means to stand as the truth. Sat Sampatti. He remains as existence. He is a transcending existence of everything. He is a transcending existence, the truth, the Sat Sampatti. Varnarati Pramodan. Ati Dirge Jevita Korameta. Who is going to revel in a long life, Ji? Long life is not man's wish. Man is not interested in a long life. Man is interested in peace. Man is interested in fullness. Peacefulness is itself called fullness. Fullness of one's being, the silentness of one's being, the peacefulness of one's being, and the presence of one's being, and freedom from all the labels of one's being. That is fullness. In Sushupti, you are free from all labels. You are free from all the thoughts. You are free from all the emotions. You are free from all the memories. You are free from all the perceptions. You transcend the whole universe, along with time and space and form and thought. And then you remain yourself. Because that transcendence itself is a known transcendence. And therefore you don't disappear. It is logically impossible that the witness can disappear. Because if the witness disappears, then what is the proof of the disappearance of the witness? Sakshi ka abhav nahi ho sakta hai. And Sakshi, we call it Sakshi in teaching, but otherwise it is Advitiyam. But in relation to the objects, we call it Sakshi. If the witness itself becomes absent, then who proves the absence of the witness? There has to be another witness. The presence of objects and the absence of the objects is proved by the witness. And if the witness itself becomes absent, then who has to prove, who has to know the absence of that witness? That is a big problem. As a logical big problem, logical flaw, fallacy. There will be a logical fallacy. Yes. And therefore, I want only the third boon to be described by you, Bhagavan. And then of this prakaranam, now I am going to do the very last shloka. After this, the testing of Nachiketa will be over. Yama is trying to test Nachiketa. Is he really interested in Brahma Vidya? Because Brahma Vidya, most of the people think Brahma Vidya they renounce ultimately. They start with a great interest in Brahma Vidya. And when the objective temptations come, material temptations come, they think material temptation is a good alternative to Brahma Vidya. But that is where here Bhagavan is saying that no object is an alternative to, no limited object is an alternative to the unlimited truth, please. No incompleteness is not an alternative to completeness, the fullness. Disturbance is not an alternative to peace. Unhappiness is not an alternative to happiness. Existence, non existence, is not an alternative to existence. Having said all these things, my dear Yama, you are not going to tell me anything. You are not going to tempt me further. You are going to teach me only the third boon. Yasmin nidam vichikitsanti mrityo. Hey mrityo, oh my dear Lord Yama. The people have doubts about which topic. There is a particular topic about which the people have doubts. Whether this world, whether this something survives the death of a man. Man comes to man is born and he dies. One day he has to die because jatasahi dhruvam mrityuhu, dhruvam janma mritasya cha. Every man that is born has to die. And therefore everybody is cremated. When somebody is cremated, it looks as though his naam nishan, everything disappears. Then nothing survives. But that's what we think. But the Lord Yama says, no, something else survives. The timeless. If there is something doesn't survive, then there should be something that survives. Because the not survival, the non-survival, the death is always in contrast to the eternity. Please, there would not be death. The one who proves the death is the eternal. The one who witnesses the death is the eternal. Please. If there is a change, then there should be changeless. If there is a form, there has to be formless. If there is a seen, then there is a seer, the conscious being. And therefore, contrast is very important. Contrast is, it is this contrast that Swami Shankaracharya always teaches. Atma, Anatma, Viveka, contrast between your existence and the universe, the limited and the unlimited. Yasminnidam vichikitsanti mrityo. Hey mrityo, the topic about which people have doubts. Yat sampraye mahati bruhinastad. About the life beyond death. Is there existence beyond death? Is there existence beyond death? We think really existence comes to an end. The form comes to an end. The thoughts come to an end. But existence, Mrityu is going to say, Yama is going to say, the existence doesn't come to an end. Because if the existence comes to an end, then who is the proof of the death? The witness never dies. Joyam varaha godam anupravishta. And this particular bath, this particular matter has entered secrecy. It is a very secret subject matter. People don't know, and that's what makes it godam anupravishta. It has become it is a very secret subject matter. It is an ununderstood subject matter. Only those who study Vedanta, they have an inkling into the fact that existence survives. But otherwise, mostly the masses don't know this subject matter. It is Godham Anupravishtaha. Godham means secrecy. And therefore, this subject matter is always secretive. Nanyam tasman nachiketa bunite. This Nachiketa, I know that me, the Nachiketa, is not going to choose any other boon for the one that I have asked for. I am not going to choose any alternative boon. Don't tempt me with alternatives. I am not for alternatives. Because what is choiceless? Choiceless things have no alternatives. What I choose by choice, they have alternatives. Objects have alternatives. But happiness has no alternative. Peace has no alternative. Existence has no alternative. Consciousness has no alternative. And every label has an alternative place. But freedom from labels has no alternative. Every limitation has an alternative. Every limited thing has an alternative. Every colony has an alternative. If you can't live in this colony, you can go to another colony. There is an alternative. This is what is called by choice thing. Things by choice. But what man is looking for, he is struggling only for the choiceless. The choiceless is, I want to be happy. The happiness is choiceless. Happiness means fullness of one's being is choiceless, and therefore it has no alternative. Existence is choiceless. Man is looking for eternity, and that has no alternative. Fullness has no alternative. Peacefulness has no alternative. Existence has no alternative. And therefore, I can go for an alternative form. I can kill myself and wait for another form. That's what one thinks. Every form can have an alternative. That's why you say, I wish I had a form like his. That means you think about alternatives for the form. Even the body has an alternative. Forms have alternative. Houses have alternative. Objects have alternative. But the truth has no alternative. And my third boon is only for the truth. Is it going to survive? Is there something that survives the death? If there is something that survives the death of all the thoughts, of all the faculties, of all the form and form based labels like caste, creed, nationality, color, etc., then that should be the eternal. That should be the truth. The surviving factor has to be the truth. And is there something that survives the death of an individual? I don't want to ask for anything else. I am not going to fall for any alternative. Having said this, then Mrityu says, yes, you have passed the test. Now I am going to teach you Brahma Vidya. You seem to be very interested in Brahma Vidya, and you seem to be untempted by any alternatives. And this being untempted by any alternative is called vairagyam, please. I told you everybody must have vairagya. Vairagyam is understanding there is no answer to this. There is no alternative. This creation is not an alternative to the source. Wave is not an alternative to the water. It's not an alternative. We always fall for the alternatives. But man is looking for. He wants always alternative things for happiness. And happiness itself is, there is no alternative for happiness. Every pleasure, every object has an alternative, another object. But happiness has no alternative. And that is what is choiceless. Even though it looks man is interested in choice, but actually he is interested only in the choiceless fullness of his being, existence of his being, and label free existence of his being, the non dualness of his being, non dual nature of his being. That is what he is interested in. And therefore, I don't want any alternative. Yama says, not, not falling for any alternative is what is called vairagyam. This universe cannot be an alternative to its source. The form is not an alternative to the formless. Thought is not an alternative to freedom, the free from the thought, the consciousness that is free from the thought. It looks as though consciousness is the result of thought. It's not true. Because if consciousness also is synonymous with thought, then what is it that illumines, that watches the absence of the thought? Because just as the presence of thoughts is known to us, the absence of thoughts also is known to us. If consciousness is synonymous with thoughts, then the disappearance of thoughts should mean disappearance of consciousness. Then what is it that experiences the absence of thoughts? In deep sleep state, we experience the absence, freedom from all the thoughts. And that experience, the one who has, is indeed the thought free. It's not just the absence of thought. It is the thought free. Understand my language properly, please. The thought free being. Silence is not absence of sound. It is the silent, sound free being. Silence is your own being. the thought-free being of yours. And therefore, the, the just as the thought is not consciousness is not an is synonymous is not synonymous with thought. Many people think when thoughts all die, consciousness also dies. This is a very casual thinking. But the serious thinking is, if the consciousness were synonymous with the thoughts, then all the thoughts disappear. Who knows who experiences the absence of all the thoughts, the freedom from all the thoughts? And therefore, the experiencer never dies, please. The experience never dies. The object of experience may be transcended, but that you experience can never be transcended. You always experience either the thought or the freedom from the thought. You experience the form or freedom from the form. This is the only experience. Even though we call it two experiences, but it is one experience. You experience the presence of thought, you experience the absence of thought. You experience the presence of object, you experience the absence of an object. Yeah, that is what is called experiencing the non-eternity. The one who experiences the eternity, non-eternity is indeed eternal, please. You cannot say that is the without really who has to prove, who has to evidence, who has to evidence the non-eternity of the non-eternals. It is the eternal that has to evidence the non-eternals. It is the eternal that has to evidence the non-eternity of the non-eternals. And therefore, Nachiketa, you have really not fallen for the alternatives. Even though I offered you so many things, but you did not accept any alternative. And understanding that fullness has no alternative is called Vairagyam. And truth has no alternative. And your existence has no alternative, please. Your existence, to be, has no alternative. To be conscious has no alternative. To be all inclusive has no alternative. To be unlimited has no alternative. And therefore, you haven't fallen for any alternatives. I offered you many alternatives, alternative pleasures, wealth I offered, long life I offered, and children and grandchildren I offered, securities inside the time I offered, but then you did not accept. Because one is you may be living a long life, but still in time you may have a lot of pleasures, but still subject to non-eternity. And therefore, even if you live in time for a long time, for billions of years, even the billions of years, one day will have to come to an end. Timelessness is different. Where the time disappears, the seconds are not there, the hours are not there. Neither time is nor the denominations of time are. And therefore, and therefore, freedom from time is different from freedom from denominations of time. Ji. Supposing you lock up yourself in a cave, you may not remember the day, you may not remember the date, you may not remember the time. That means what? What time is it now? It doesn't mean you have become timeless, please. You have transcended the denominations of time, but you are still a form. Even if you don't see, even if you are not aware of the denominations of time, even if you are not aware of the denominations of time, you may transcend the denominations of time. But when you are awake as in a jiva, you are still in time. And therefore, freedom from time is different from freedom from denominations of time. I want you to understand this point. Denominations of time is different from denominations of a month. Time is different from like days and weeks and months and seasons, etc. You may transcend them, you may not remember them, but freedom from time is different. When you go to sleep, you are free from time. When you transcend time, you transcend everything that is concomitant to time. The whole universe is concomitant to time. It is something, when you transcend time, you transcend everything in time. The universe you transcend, the embodiment you transcend. And therefore, your transcendence of everything has no alternative, please. And you can transcend everything, but you can't transcend your existence. Your peacefulness, the peacefulness of your existence, you can't transcend. That untranscendable nature of your being has no alternative. And you did not fall for any alternative. I offered you many alternatives, but you did not fall for any alternatives. That means I can easily teach you Brahma Vidya, knowing very well that you can understand Brahma Vidya. Because Brahma Vidya cannot be taught to a person who is not qualified for Brahma Vidya. And therefore, adhikaritvam has to be there. This is called adhikaritvam, means the qualified. Adhikaritvam does not mean right. This person has a right, that person has a right, has no right. Like a person to becomes a doctor, he has to be qualified for the doctor. So we are only talking about the qualifications. We are not talking about the rights. When we talk about the rights, then it becomes the caste and creed, they may be talking about the rights. But here in the Shastra, we are talking about the qualifications. Qualifications means when you are qualified for Brahma Vidya, you can be. And what qualifies you for Brahma Vidya is called Vairagyam, Viveka, to be able to discern between the to see the contrast between your existence, the seer and the seen, and Vairagyam, and the seer has no alternative. The seen has alternatives, but the seer has no alternative. The heard sounds have alternatives, but the hearer has no alternative. The inert have alternatives, but the conscious has no alternative. Your presence has no alternative. What you can transcend has an alternative, but the transcender has no alternatives. And therefore, I consider you as qualified for Brahma Vidya, and therefore I am going to teach. And the first verse says, Anyachreya. This is a very important verse. Every human being, before he comes to Vedanta, he has to become a good human being. Anyat Shreya. Goodness is different. Anyat Shreya. Goodness is different. Goodness means a universal value, that is to be nice to others, to be pleasant to others. Just as you want others to be pleasant to you, to be nice to you, be nice to others. That is the first meaning of Shreya. Shreya means the universal values are not subjective, please. Customs may be subjective, but values are not subjective. Values are universals. Use the word universal for the values. The values are, even though some people call them eternal values, I don't call them eternals. I call them universal values. Because universally, even if you go to heaven, you want the heavenly denizens to be nice to you, not make you unpleasant, make you uncomfortable. And just therefore, what you expect others to do to you, the same thing you should do to others also. That is called a value. And everybody wants to, you don't want anybody to tell you lies. Therefore, tell the truth to others. That becomes a universal value. The expected value. What others expect of you, that's a value. What you expect from others and what others expect from you is a universal value, is not a subjective value. And the one who follows those values is called a good human being. Therefore, before you become a Vedanti, first become a good human being. When you are in difficulty, you expect others to help you when you are in difficulty. Similarly, when others are in difficulty, they also expect you to help them. That's a universal value. Universal value. Anya Shreya. Universal value is different. Anya Dutaiva Preya. Preya means pleasantness, something a pleasure. An object is different. A value is different, an object is different. This is the first meaning. As a human being, try to follow values. And these values keep you relatively peaceful. When you follow the values, the world will not disturb you. When you don't disturb the world, when you follow values, you are left alone. When you disturb others, they disturb you. When you rub against others, others rub against you. And therefore, you follow values, they also respect you. You respect others, others respect you. This is a universal value. You love others, others love you. You help others, others help you. This is a universal value. And that universal value is different. An objective pleasure is different. Supposing, even though the pleasure cannot be an alternative to a value, a pleasure is non eternal, whereas a value makes you relatively mentally peaceful. A peace is different from pleasure. A pleasure is excitable, it excites you. You go for it, you are indulge in it, but it has a beginning and an end. It's a sense pleasure. Sense pleasure is has a beginning and an end, and it is non-eternal, it ends. But a value makes you relatively peaceful. Thus, there is a difference between peacefulness of the mind and mental sense pleasures. Understanding this difference is the first thing that a human being has to do. Peace is different from a sense pleasure. This is one meaning. The second meaning is Shreyaha means, this is a very big meaning. Ji. Shreyaha means moksha. Shreyas means moksha. Moksha means freedom from avidya. It is not reaching some other state, some place. Ji. Moksha is not a state or a place, an abode. Moksha means freedom from the felt ignorance, freedom from the felt self error. That is called from the felt dukkham, from the felt struggle. And that freedom is what is called moksha. The word moksha etymologically also means freedom, freedom from the avidya, freedom from the self ignorance, and freedom from self error is what is called moksha. That is the meaning of the word Shreyas. Shreyas, one is a moksha, the other is a sense pleasure. Preya means comfortable life, a life of comforts, a life of sense pleasures, a life of power, a life of position, a life of wealth, a life of gadgets, etc. Tau Ubhe, these two, one is the Shreyas, the other is Preyas. Shreyas means moksha, freedom from avidya. I have given you the very basic meaning. This is a superior meaning, this is a profounder meaning. I am giving you. Shreyaha means moksha, Preyaha means a sense pleasure, a life of comforts, a life of pleasures, a royal life of pleasures, a life of power. Preyaha, te ubhe, these two, nanarthe. In fact, they are meant for their nanarthe. They have two they are two contrasts. Nanarthe means they have different views. Moksha is different, sense pleasure is different. There is a contrast between moksha and prayers. There is a contrast between shreyas and prayers. That is what is called nanarthe. Purushagam sinetaha. Every man is confronted. Sinetaha means bind. Purushagam means man. Sinetaha means they bind. They approach. The shreyas and prayers approach man. He is confronted with these two. He has to make a choice every moment. Is it value or is it a sense pleasure? Is it objective pleasure that I want or is it something, a peaceful, the peace of full value? Is it a value that I should choose for or should I choose a sense pleasure? In this manner, he is confronted. Please choose one of us. They both come and approach a man. Please, this is Shreyas and this is Prayas. This is a this gives a value, gives you, makes you peaceful, and sense pleasure gives you indulge in it. It gives you comfort. Now between the two, one is non-eternal, the other paves the way to the eternal. A value paves the way to the eternal, paves the way. It doesn't guarantee eternal, but it paves the way to the eternal. Peacefulness paves the way to the eternal. And therefore, tayoho shreyadanasya sadhu bhavati. Between the two, the one who chooses shreya, shreyadanasya, the one who chooses the shreyas over the prayers, the one who chooses the shreyas over the prayers, the one who chooses a value over a discipline over indiscipline, self control over non self control, shreyas over prayers. The one who chooses, for him good happens. Sadhu bhavati. He is blessed indeed. Hiyate arthat yavu preyo vrinite. The one who chooses the sense pleasure, he will have neither shreyas nor prayers also. Because prayers also is non-eternal. One day, a time will come, he will be free from all the non-eternals. If he chooses the non-eternal, it's like democracy and dictatorship. If you choose the democracy, at least you will have food to eat. You may not have so much of freedom, but you will have food to eat. But if you choose the dictatorship, you will have neither freedom nor food. That is what they say. That is what is said. And therefore, in the same manner here also, if you choose the eternal, you will get the eternal. If you choose for the non-eternal, then you get either the non-eternal or eternal. There is no eternal because you have chosen the non-eternal. You can't get the eternal. And if you choose the non-eternal, you will lose ultimately the non-eternal also because it will come and go. And therefore, hiyate arthat yavu preyo vrinete. The one who chooses the prayers, he loses both shreyas and prayers. The one who chooses the shreyas, some good will happen to him. Sadhu bhavati. Something अच्छा हो जाता है उनको. And whereas the one who chooses the prayers, he will lose both shreyas and prayers. Similarly, a person who follows the value, he will be peaceful. But the one who chooses the prayers, he will be neither peaceful nor comfortable in time. He will be he will be forsaken by both. He will be renounced by both. He will be neither. It's like a dhobi's dog, neither ghar ka nor ghat ka. Yes, neither ghar ka nor ghat ka. That is what is said clearly here. That is, and therefore, to begin with, every human being has to follow values, the universal values. They are not subjective. Your values are different from my values, they say. What are values? Your values are different from my values. Never. All values are the same, G. Universal values, whether it is Christianity or any other religion, the values, when it comes to the values, they are the same. The customs are different. The rituals are different. Customs are different. Hindu customs may be different from Christian customs. They are subjective. They are meant to, they change in time. Customs can change in time. The values are always there. Speak truth is a value. Honesty is a value. Honesty in every religion, it is the same. Values are common to all religions. Therefore, values are universal, please. There are no religious values. Religious customs may be there. Religious rituals may be there. Religious beliefs may be there. Religious values are there are no such things called religious values. Prayer also is not a religious value. Prayer is something that is a very human value. Human being feels helpless and he cries for help, and that is prayer. Therefore, it is a social value. It is a human value. All values are human values and they are universal values. And therefore, follow universal values and become peaceful. And don't unnecessarily go after the material wealth. Material wealth, if you fall for the material wealth, you will lose both material wealth and also the peace. If you go for the peace, at least you will get, it will pave the way to Brahma Vidya, it will pave the way to self knowledge. And this is the first verse. And the second verse we will see in the next class. Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.